If you've ever looked at a website dissecting why certain companies fail, there's one thing you'll always see most of the time, and that is poor management. Poor management can sink a company, and especially when the people in charge not only have no idea what they're doing, but when they also refuse to learn from their mistakes. And the thing is, if your company refuses to learn from mistakes and has lots of management decisions, even if you put out a great product, it still won't do very well. And just look at the Amiga, which at one point did so badly that there was an Easter egg in some firmware versions that said, "We made Amiga, they fucked it up." That was actually put in there by the engineers at how they felt at Commodore management. And that's why the Amiga ended up dying out, was because of poor management. And right now, Nintendo is making some very bad mistakes that are probably costing them the next console generation as well. Now, the other day, Ubisoft said about the NX that they believe it will recapture the Wii audience. Now, if you don't remember, the Wii was a gaming system that was very weak and underpowered, but because of its gimmick control scheme, it sold very well to people who usually didn't buy gaming consoles and games for them, such as soccer moms, grandmas, families, those kind of people. And well, many games didn't sell very well on the Wii except for games like Wii Sports and other games that fit in that mold. And well, the Nintendo Wii also ended up dying out quicker than the Xbox 360 and PS3, and the 360 just ended production, and the PS3 is probably going to real soon at this point. And yet the Wii U, on the other hand, instead of being a massive seller like the Wii was, instead it's being discontinued at around the same time a gaming system from 2005 was discontinued, and probably not long before a system from 2006 is being discontinued as well. And meanwhile, the Wii U's competitors are already launching slim versions and improved versions, if you know what I mean. And yet here we have a Ubisoft employee saying that Nintendo is still trying to capture that casual market that faded away, which is what they try to do with the Wii U as well, and guess what? The Wii U was a flop. But it doesn't end there. If you remember, the Wii U was not only weak and underpowered, but it even used a variant of the PowerPC G3 processor from 1997, just with 3 cores and overclocked. And not only was it weak and underpowered, with Nintendo games still looking far behind those of Microsoft or Sony games, but it also showed during the short period of time when the Wii U actually had some third-party support, where games looked and ran worse on the Wii U compared to even the 360 and the PS3, which were systems that were several years older. I mean, if the Xbox One and PlayStation 4 are cut-back PCs, then the Wii U is like going to Walmart and buying a brand new laptop only to find out that it's about as slow as a laptop you had 8 to 10 years ago, because that is what the Wii U is like. Now, one thing in common with companies that eventually end up running themselves into the ground is that they make the same mistake over and over and over again. And what is Nintendo doing? Making the same mistake over and over and over again. Now, all the way back in 2001, Nintendo released the GameCube, and to its credit, it was a very well-designed system, and it was the last system that Nintendo made that was targeted to gamers. It was more powerful than the PlayStation 2, but yet could be produced for less money due to the fact that it was a very simple system to manufacture. And if you've ever seen a GameCube motherboard, there are only a few chips on it, and then go compare that with, say, an early PlayStation 2 motherboard. But on the other hand, the GameCube had plenty of problems. On the hardware side, there weren't too many, other than maybe the controversial controller and the mini discs, and the lack of an Ethernet port standard on all versions of the GameCube, like later PlayStation 2s and all original Xboxes. But then on the other hand, you have a lot of problems with the GameCube that could be attributed to Nintendo's management. For example, the GameCube era was actually when Nintendo's graphics don't matter philosophy started to take place. Now, during the Nintendo 64 and Super Nintendo era, Nintendo talked about graphics a lot, and they actually acted on it too. From creating the Super FX chip for the Super Nintendo to getting Silicon Graphics workstations and using them for pre-rendered 3D games on the Super Nintendo, such as Donkey Kong Country and Super Mario role-playing game, to actually partnering with Silicon Graphics to develop the Nintendo 64 console. And there's actually a promo video where Silicon Graphics employees are bragging about how powerful the Nintendo Ultra 64, as it was called, was going to be. But in 2001, Nintendo's management was saying things that don't sound that far off from what a hardcore Nintendo defender would say on a message board. In 2001, Iwata told reporters that there's not much more developers can do to impress players only with pictures. The hardest thing is to entertain. Then Hiroshi Yamauchi said that the industry should focus less on realistic graphics and more on ways to expand the market. And in something that sounds like too many Nintendo fan forum posts, Yamauchi also criticized AAA games, and he said that large-scale games are done for. If they continue to be made, then companies around the world will go under. And Shigeru Miyamoto also said that smaller discs used in the GameCube, you know, the ones that couldn't store data and had to have games split over multiple discs, he said that they sent a message to developers that they don't need to make long games with realistic graphics. Now, of course, we all know what happened to the GameCube. It didn't do so well for numerous reasons. And while the Wii, which was essentially an overclocked GameCube, did fairly well, I mean, it was the best-selling system of its generation, the games for it didn't sell that well for it because many gamers who bought the Wii only bought, say, Wii Sports and some of the other Wii-branded games, and maybe Guitar Hero and other casual games along the lines of that. The Wii U, on the other hand, was a complete and total disaster, and not only did it sell worse than the GameCube, which sold worse than the original Xbox did, but the Wii U also did so badly that not only is Nintendo replacing the console early, but the Wii U also is not really getting many games this year. And of course, it seems to be all but abandoned by even Nintendo. So with the Nintendo NX, many gamers have been hoping that this would be Nintendo's turnaround, that Nintendo would go from being irrelevant, from making underpowered hardware, and from making game systems that third parties didn't want to develop games for, to being relevant with all the games and as one place to enjoy all their games at. Well, here's the thing with the Nintendo NX. Nintendo has not changed one bit, and while many gamers have been hoping that Nintendo would make a system that's actually powerful, the Nintendo NX isn't going to be powerful probably, and the reason I'm saying that is Reggie Fils-Aime in an interview with Bloomberg said, "For us, it's not about specs." And then he said, "For us, it's about content." You know, even though Nintendo systems have lacked third party for several generations now, and even though Nintendo's systems have been weak and underpowered ever since 2006. And while Nintendo has tried to be Apple in the sense that they are being as secretive as possible about the NX, from their statements, it seems like Nintendo has not learned one thing from their failures. And it seems like they might continue to make the same mistake as well with the NX, because that's what happens with companies that fail. They make the same mistake over and over and over again until they blow through all their money. And just because Nintendo has been around since the 1800s and has lots of money doesn't mean that they're too big to fail. Does anybody remember Sears? I mean, they used to be a big brand at one point. Now they're pretty much seen as a joke and associated with going out of business signs. And of course, Kodak. I mean, if you grew up in the 80s or 90s and even 2000s, you probably remember seeing Kodak signs at your local grocery store and Kodak film everywhere. And if you took pictures, you probably used a film camera that took Kodak film or Fujifilm, but Kodak was the one that was more aggressively marketed. And now look. Here's the thing, Kodak is irrelevant. They couldn't adapt to change, and now they are merely just a brand name. And you know, both those companies were around since the 1800s. And look where they are now. They are irrelevant, and who knows how much longer they'll last. And here's the thing, if Nintendo wants to stay relevant and not become some irrelevant nameplate or go out of business or become third party, they need to accept the reality of the console market. They need to make a competitive system and not some gimmicky garbage that's underpowered again, because that's what nobody wants except for maybe a few vocal Nintendo fans online. Nobody wants gimmicks. Remember how well Star Fox Zero did with its gimmick controls? I mean, sure, I know a few people who liked Star Fox Zero's controls, but I also could name a few people who think that Nickelback is great music, or Limp Bizkit's great music, or Linkin Park's great music. I think you get the idea. So yeah, that is the thing. Nintendo is irrelevant, and they're just going to be getting worse because they are making the same mistakes over and over again. And I guarantee when the NX is revealed, most people other than the group of Nintendo fans who think everything they do is amazing and the people who, think Nintendo is the greatest game company ever because of nostalgia, other than that, everybody's going to think it's a joke probably, and I guarantee it. That's all that needs to be said. Thanks for watching and subscribe for more.